Well, peace, salam, and shalom to all of you. I have started the recording and it's almost time to start our class. Welcome back to all our past participants and a very warm welcome to all the new participants who are joining us today for the first time. Since this is a first time for a few of you, I would like to tell a little bit about this class before we start today. My name is Sophia Said. I'm the executive director of the Interfaith Center of Arkansas, and Interfaith Explorations is one of our educational classes. It's my distinct honor to host it for you all. The Interfaith Center is a nonprofit organization which is committed to reducing fear and prejudice among world religions. And our work is especially guided by the understanding that gaining knowledge about different religions and creating meaningful relationships with the people of those religions increases positive attitude about those religions. And Interfaith Explorations is one of the classes that we are offering this winter. Along with this, there is one more class which is starting, and I'm going to just share it briefly with you. The other class which we are offering in winter is called Sacred Silence class. I hope you can see it on your screen. It will be a weekly class on the teaching and practice of silence. We will be offering it on second Tuesday morning of every month. And the way the class will go is that we will have three teachers, a Jewish, a Christian, and a Muslim teacher. All three of them will teach about silence as a sacred practice from their faith tradition. Then we will have time to practice that silence. And in the end, we will have a question answer series. So it's a once a month class from January through May. And if any of you are interested, please let me know, email me, and I will send you the registration link for that class. So, along with me here is my friend, my dear friend, and our teacher, Dr. J. McDaniel, who is the moderator for this class. Among the many hats that Jay wears is that Jay serves on the board of Cobb Institute in California. The Cobb Institute, which is named after its founder, John Cobb, it promotes a process and relational way of understanding and living in the world. It shares wisdom, it emphasizes harmony, and focuses on common good. The Cobb Institute promotes and aims to build an ecological civilization. Jay serves on the board, and the reason I'm talking about Cobb Institute is because Cobb Institute is one of the co-sponsors for this winter session of these classes. So Jay will tell us more about it whenever he deems appropriate. So the format of the class for the new students is that I introduce the letter and the guest of the class. Then Jay makes a comment or two about the theme, and then we hand it to our guest speaker. A speaker always has 30 minutes to share his own personal journey, his own story in the light of the letter of the day. And then we have 20 minutes of moderated discussion with Dr. J. McDaniel. All classes are recorded. That's why I always ask you to keep yourself muted unless you are speaking. And also, all classes are available on our YouTube channel. So, coming to today's class, we thought it's befitting to start with the letter A for attention, also known as mindfulness, awareness, not only because it's the first letter in the alphabet, which it is, but also because it is the foundational letter in our learning about spiritual literacy. We have been discussing so many spiritual qualities of heart and mind. But first, it's really important that we stay attentive and present and alert so we don't miss out those essential moments in our spiritual life when we can experience grace as we learned about it, when we can experience opportunities of gratitude and reverence and forgiveness and connection, humility, compassion, friendships. So we must start with attention and use it as one of the foundational traits. So today our special guest who will be talking about A for attention is a friend, Mike Mueller, who is a practicing Zen Buddhist and a student of Kwan School of Zen. Mike is also the author of the blog Single Buddhist Dad, and he has contributed to several other publications along with Single Buddhist Dad. He serves on the board of Ecumenical Buddhist Society. Mike is also a teacher at Ecumenical Buddhist Society. And in his part time, he's a strategist and business developer for a digital marketing firm, which is based in St. Louis. So, Mike, welcome to our class, and we are so excited that you are here with us today. With that, I'm going to hand you to Jay to start us on attention, and then we'll go to Mike.
Well, I'm so glad to have Mike with us today. He was a student of mine many years ago, and it's just great to see him. I see him periodically, and I'm glad to be with him. And I'm going to tell a little story and then hand it over to you, Mike. But I was influenced by Thomas Merton many, many years ago. And Thomas Merton was influenced by both Buddhism and he was a Catholic monk. So I was reading a person that was deeply shaped by Buddhism and by Christianity, and he was my mentor. And so in that line, I met somebody who was a Zen teacher in Rye, New York. Her name was Susan Postal. She used to come to Little Rock. And she was what she called a Christian Buddhist or a Buddhist Christian, but more of a Zen teacher probably than a Christian. But I once asked, in her mind, her, how do you understand the relationship between Christianity and Buddhism? And she said, well, it's kind of like being fed by two intravenous tubes. And so you've got your arms out, and there's one line that comes through these veins in this arm, and another through these. And both are lineages. And one is the Buddhist lineage, and it shapes my bones. And one is a Christian lineage, and it nourishes me too. But they're different. They mix together, but they're different. And it's important to honor the differences, not just the similarities. And so I asked someone who was also shaped by Susan's metaphor, who was also a Christian and a Buddhist. She's a psychotherapist down there in Little Rock. And I said, if you've got those two intravenous tubes, and one's from Christianity, and the fluid nourishes you, and one's from Buddhism, and the fluid nourishes you, what do you get from the Buddhist lineage that you don't get from the Christian lineage? What is the fluid that you get from Buddhism? And she thought for a while, and she said, attention. Attention. She said, in the Christian side of my life, I could be Jewish, the Jewish side. I could be Muslim, the Muslim side. I could be anything, but attention was not thematized. Faith, surrender, awe, love, wonder, all these good things, but not attention. It was the Buddhists that had thematized attention as a soul virtue in its own right. And I needed that. And I didn't get that from my Christianity. I got it from Buddhism. So in light of that little story, Mike, we'd like to hear about your pilgrimage, how you discovered Buddhism, the role that attention plays for you in your life. And we're just glad to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay and Sophia, very much for inviting me. I'm deeply honored to participate in this with you, and I will hopefully not bore you with my story, but it is particular and sort of original in its own way, and I'm happy to share that. It just occurred to me, if it's okay with you, Jay and Sophia, maybe a nice way to begin this would be for us to just take a couple of minutes out and to pay attention to ourselves. So if you don't mind, if I could just lead us through a couple, 3-4 minute little mindfulness practice, sitting wherever we are right now, at home, wherever you are. I'll do a little guided meditation just for a couple of minutes. It won't take very long, just to kind of maybe set the tone for us talking about paying attention. Is that okay, Sophia and Jay?
That's an excellent idea, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's do that. So if you're all somewhere in a chair, on a couch, somewhere hopefully comfortable where you're sitting, but if you can adjust yourself in such a way that you can sit straight. So if you're sitting back, maybe come up on yourself a little bit and forward so you have a straight spine and you feel some sense of solidity beneath your tailbone where you're sitting on something kind of firm, not something super soft. And the reason being is we want to get those shoulders back just a little bit and we want our spinal column to be straight. So there's almost a nice linear line from your tailbone going all the way up your spine and out the crown of your head, going skywards here at the top and going down into the earth beneath you, a nice straight line. So go ahead and make any adjustment that you need to your body to try and get your spine straight and sitting erect. Your hands can just be in your lap, relaxed. Your head sort of floats naturally on top of your spinal column. No need to jack it back or push your chin forward. Just let it be natural, a nice neutral position. I suggest keeping your eyes open, at least slightly, looking ahead. And the reason is we're talking about attention. We're not here to get sleepy or zone out. We want to still be aware of where we are, who we're with. So keep those eyes maybe slightly open, gazing softly ahead of you into the distance, whatever spot you want to choose. And just breathe. Don't have to do anything fancy with your breath. Don't have to exaggerate it. You're just letting it do what it naturally does. And maybe now you might notice things around you. I know I can hear cars here outside my window, or maybe you have an animal in the room with you, or something that you would normally say, well, that's distracting me, but maybe this time don't think of it as a distraction. It just is what it is. You don't have to label it. If you're having any thoughts that are entering your mind right now, wondering if you're doing this right, or maybe what you're doing after this meeting, or don't push those away. It's okay. It's natural. Just let them be part of this experience. You can acknowledge those thoughts and let them go. And just come back to your breath. Notice the inhale as the air fills up your lungs and your chest expands. And the exhale then as you let the air escape out of your mouth or nose. And you feel then that sudden urge to inhale again. And so the cycle repeats, inhale, exhale. It's all perfectly normal without any effort from you. So now I'm going to just be quiet just for another minute, and we're going to sit here in silence together for just a moment. And then we'll come back together to start. Okay, and now we're back. Thank you for doing that with me. Hope you got a little taste of tuning in to yourself and to your environment and everything around you and paid attention. Something we don't normally take much time to do. We think we do, I think. We believe we pay attention, but actually we become sort of passive and we just let things pass through us without really noticing what's happening, whether that's an internal or external. So, as Jay was saying, and Sophia were saying, I am on the board of the Ecumenical Buddhist Society, which is a nonprofit center in downtown Little Rock, right across from the state capitol on 3rd Street. And I participate in several practices down there, mostly the Quantum Zen group, which I've been participating in for several years, that meets on Tuesday nights. But I also lead a teen mindfulness group and also participate somewhat in a 12-step in Buddhism group that we have going on down there as well. So I'm pretty active there at the Ecumenical Buddhist Society. And I also, as Sophia said, am kind of a part-time writer, and I work on some different things. My Zen practice, in addition to the Ecumenical Buddhist Society, I also participate in a Zen group with the Kansas Zen Center in Lawrence, Kansas. Pre-pandemic, I used to make regular retreats up there to practice with that group, but now that we're all on Zoom, we have lots of Zoom practices that we do together, and I participate in those as well. So what I want to do just for a few minutes here, I'm going to keep looking up at the corner of my computer here and make sure I'm tracking time correctly. Sophia said she wanted me to talk a little bit about my own personal history and what brought me to, in this case for me, a Zen Buddhist practice, and how that then relates to this idea of paying attention. And I think it really does. I think there's a lot of connection. You know, what you said, Jay, really resonated with me when you talked about the person you spoke to, about these two veins of Christianity and Buddhism. And personally, I grew up as a Catholic, I should say that. I was an altar boy. I went to a Catholic grammar school. I went through confirmation. I almost went into a pre-seminary program, had my parents stayed in Chicago, but we left Illinois when I was about to start high school. We moved to Hot Springs. So I'm from Chicago originally. But I was, very much a devout Catholic, and I still love Catholicism. It's not that I all of a sudden don't, but it's just not my particular path at this point in my life. But yeah, Jay, when you were talking about the person you spoke to, this idea that what Buddhism gives her is also, I think, what it gives me is this sense of paying attention to things in a way that I had never really done that before. As far as what brought me to that practice, so about I guess this is 2021 now, so over 5 years ago, I had a series of events that occurred in my life that many ways changed the trajectory of my spiritual practice. Before that, as I said, I had been as a child, as a young man, Catholic, and then I became very agnostic. Like Jay said, I was a student at Hendrix. I was super interested in Jay's classes and the other classes that I was taking there, but I wouldn't say they spurred on some religious journey for me. I was interested in Eastern religion. I was still interested in Christianity. I was interested in any kind of mysticism or spirituality, but I had really no direction. And I think for most of my adulthood in my 30s and the 40s, that's pretty much where I was. I didn't have anything really that I was doing. But then I had these events that occurred, again, six-ish years ago. And they considered one, my son was diagnosed with cancer. He was a young teenager, and was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when he was 13 years old, which is a hugely existential moment for me, as you would imagine as a dad, to have a teenage child who's all of a sudden facing, this idea of mortality, and how helpless I felt throughout that process. I also had an ex-spouse who went through addiction, a very serious drug addiction, at the same time that he was going through his cancer treatment. So I became very much a single dad, a full custodial kind of single dad because of what was going on with her struggles with addiction. I also got pushed out of the company I helped found, so I became sort of jobless. And finally, the long-term relationship I was in with the woman abruptly ended. So all of these four things, my son's cancer diagnosis, his mom's struggle with addiction, which was at its height, job loss and relationship ending, all happened within the same 18 months. And I literally just hit a wall, an emotional, mental, spiritual wall. And I had dabbled in Buddhist kind of meditation. Like I said, when I was younger, I would do a little of this, a little of that. I would try things out. Nothing really felt right, but I was interested. I had dabbled in Zen Buddhist meditation before, but when these things happened to me, I was at such a loss. And so much suffering was going on, emotional suffering, that I turned back to that practice because I felt my reality just spinning away from me, my sense of control over my reality spinning away from me. So I started going back to the Ecumenical Buddhist Society, to the Kwan Zen group I spoke of earlier, and I began sitting with them. And I started doing just once a week. And then slowly I started increasing it. And of course, this is now over several years to where I have pretty much a daily practice. And I'm very much devoted to that path because it works for me. So what I learned through that, and I'll say I have another experience I want to share with you. So I don't want to forget about that, but I'll say more about it too, because it really brings to focus this path of paying attention in Buddhism to me. But what I learned was that when I was going through this suffering, all I wanted to do was escape. But what I really needed to do was to tune in. All I'd wanted to do was get away from the hurt and the pain and the worry about my son's illness, about all these things were happening. I wanted to, and the idea of a practice that would distract me, which is, I would constantly be looking for things to distract me from thinking and worrying and about those things. But what I figured out by beginning to go into a Buddhist meditation practice for me was that the more I tuned in and I paid attention to what was going on inside of me, the more I began to release and to accept and to find some serenity and peacefulness in my situations. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen quickly, but it certainly happened. So like the little mini practice we just did together for 5 minutes, this idea of coming into the breath, which is the most natural thing we do, right? It is completely part of our living experience. There's no thinking involved. There's no brain that says, okay, take a breath. Okay, exhale. Okay, inhale, right? We're not thinking through that at all. We're doing it completely naturally. Our human experience allows us to do that. It is the most basic human experience it is. And so a Buddhist meditation practice is very much focused on that singular thing, coming back to the breath and not distracting ourselves from it, not thinking, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that, right? To keep coming back to the breath. And having a discipline of a sitting practice where we do it sustained, like I tend to, in the mornings, I'll sit for 25 minutes sustained in silent meditation. Sometimes longer if I'm doing a retreat of some kind. It could go for an hour or two with little breaks in there. It can go all day. And there are Buddhist practices that go for weeks, right, as sort of a sustained practice. But no one is saying that everyone has to do that. But the idea is a practice where there's sustained silence, where you allow yourself to just be and pay attention to your inner life and to not be distracted by the torrent of ideas and thoughts and feelings that seem to bombard us all the time. So let me come back to another quick story here. that maybe will kind of help make this point a little bit more for me personally. So I mentioned my son's cancer diagnosis in 2014, the fall of 2014. Shortly after his diagnosis, literally 2 days after his diagnosis, I was on my way somewhere here in Little Rock, and I was reeling. I had just gotten the phone call from the doctor. And although and by the way, he's fine. I don't know if I've said that, but he's great. He's, cured. He's been free of cancer now for 5 years plus. So I don't want anyone to worry about that. But at that time, I didn't know that for sure. So 2 days after his diagnosis, I was going downtown here in Little Rock somewhere. I was driving, and I was over on Chester Street, if you know where that is, near Chester and Cantrell. And I came across a dog, a small little Dachshund that was in the street, sort of in the street, but sort of right there on the curb, sort of on the sidewalk, right there on the curb. But it was a Sunday morning, and I was really concerned, although there wasn't a ton of traffic. I was really concerned that something would happen to this dog. So I saw this dog, and I pulled over across the street in a parking lot, and I thought, I am going to grab this dog. I could see it had a collar on. And so I figured if somebody doesn't stop and help this poor dog could get hurt. So I pulled over, got out of the car. Dog is at one side of the street, and I was on the other side of the street where I had parked my car. And I got out, and I was going to walk across the street to go get this dog and to take it to safety. And I saw a car coming kind of to my right here. I'm pointing over here in this direction. And it was going to cross in front of me and the dog and continue on. And I thought, well, I'm just going to wait for this car to pass by. But when this dog saw me, for whatever reason, this dog thought, I like this human. I don't know this human, but I like this human. And so the dog looked at me like he knew me and started running across the street to me. Didn't run away, ran to me. At the same moment that car was coming, I was waiting for it to pass, and the dog was crossing, ran right over the dog, right before my eyes. Literally, I was feet away from it. I watched the tire run over the dog. I watched the dog bleed to death right there in front of me, taking its last breath. I was horrified. I was stunned. I had, in many ways, I thought caused the dog's death, because perhaps if I hadn't pulled over and hadn't tried to save the dog, nothing would have happened. The dog would have maybe meandered in a different direction. But here I was trying to save this dog. And by doing so, I may have contributed to its death. So I I got a blanket out of my car. The poor guy that drove the truck and his girlfriend were just horrified. They just didn't see it. It wasn't their fault. They just didn't know. And it happened so quickly, and they pulled over right away, and she's crying. The girlfriend's crying in the passenger side. And they were like, "Is it your dog?" I was like, "No, I was just here to help." So I got a sheet, a blanket out of my trunk. I took it to the dog. I wrapped the dog up, picked it up, took it over to the curbside in the grass. And I saw the collar. I saw a phone number on the little tag. Called it. The person whose dog it was lived just right next door, and came out. And I had to tell this man that I witnessed his dog's death, and that I was very sorry, that I was only trying to help. And he was obviously very upset and sad, and took the dog. And I got back in my car and went home, and literally just broke down, inconsolable for a while. I was a complete mess. And I had cried more than I'd cried even at the 2 days before, when I'd heard about my son's cancer diagnosis. And the reason I tell the story is there was something that shifted in me that day. And I don't think I wasn't aware of it at the moment, but in retrospect, I know that that was a huge moment of shift for me. What I came to understand was that um, I was completely helpless to do anything. That as much as we want to control the circumstances of our life, we have very little ability to do so sometimes. And I didn't want my son to be sick. I didn't want his mother to be an addict. I didn't want all these other things to be happening in my life. But no distraction was going to change that. They were just going to happen. And I didn't want that dog to die, but it happened. And these things happen. And when I finally paid attention to what was going on with me and how I had been trying to, going into that whole experience, going back a few years, I was focused on career and I was focused on starting a new family with this woman that I was with. I was focused on all these external things to distract me from my inner life. And all these four events, all these things happen in succession. And I had to start paying attention to what was going on. And it was that moment, thereafter this experience I just described to you, that I started to go back to the Buddhist practice. I started to really sit with what my life was at that time and accept what it was. And gradually over weeks and months, the more I sat and paid attention to the fact that all of us don't know. We have this saying in their quantum school of Zen, in particular, our founding Zen master Seung-Sang, who is from Korea, would very often say to his students, to keep a don't know mind. Don't know mind. Moment to moment, only don't know. He would often say that. Moment to moment, only don't know. This idea that we don't know anything. We really don't know what the next moment, the next hour, or the next year will bring. So can we sit moment to moment in this don't know, pay attention to that don't know mind, acknowledge it, be with it, fully really just be with it. And so there was just some portal, that opened inside of me, I think, after that experience. And it wasn't immediate. It wasn't like an on-off switch, but there was a crack that appeared for me that started shedding light in, where I realized what I had to do was to accept this don't know mind and to explore it, to pay attention to it, to bring my focus to it. So in a Buddhist practice and a meditation practice, like we were just doing a little bit, kind of a mind, you can call it mindfulness or meditation. I mean, I use the word Buddhist, but really, Jay, we could have I'm sure you would be much more informative on this topic, whether the Buddhism is a religion or not. I mean, certainly it is in many ways, and other people say it's really not a religion per se. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. I don't necessarily get hung up on the idea whether it's a religion or not. For me, it's a path. And that path, that Buddhist path, that meditative path of paying attention to myself and to the world around me, whatever's going on, is what slowly has brought some sense of acceptance in my life. And I say acceptance not in a sense of passivity, like I passively just accept whatever happens. Well, whatever, because that's going to happen. Whatever, I don't care. That's not the case. That's not that kind of passivity, where we are actually quite the opposite. We are still active, engaged in our lives. We're just engaged in a moment-to-moment basis. And so now I feel like I'm rambling, but what I was going to say is this idea of paying attention involves a sitting meditation practice for me, and also a chanting practice and a prostrating or a bowing practice. So most of my practices that I do personally with either the Little Rock Zen group or the one in Kansas involves those three things: a silent sitting practice where we pay attention to our breath, a chanting practice where we chant, usually in Korean for my tradition, because it stems in Korea. And sometimes we do some English chants as well. We chant things together, not because it's a prayer where we're trying to elicit a God or some higher power. We're chanting basically as a way of paying attention to our voices, paying attention to our experience in unison as a group, as a sangha, as we say. And the same is true of bowing. So we do these prostrations, these full body bows, where we stand, we bow, we come to our knees, we bow all the way down to where our foreheads are touching the floor. We come back up and we stand, and we do this. I do it 108 times a day in succession, 108 bows a day. And again, it's about paying attention. Because when you're paying attention to only chanting, only bowing, only sitting, you're not using your thinking mind. You're not using you're disengaging that thinking mind that's always wanting to rationalize and organize and find reasons for this or that or the other. And we're disengaging from it. And we're only doing what we're doing. We're only sitting. We're only breathing. We're only chanting. We're only bowing. We're bringing our attention to our immediate experience. And that is the practice. I mean, Zen practice is the practice of paying attention. I mean, that is what it is. To whatever. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a very well-known Vietnamese Zen Buddhist, monk, author, world leader on peace. He's quite elderly now, I think, quite frail, near the end of his life, in his 90s. But he's written many books. So he had a practice, called washing the dishes, and he would write about this. About part of his practice sometimes was to wash the dishes, and he would talk in very great detail about the way he would use something to rub soap onto the dish, and how the water felt, the temperature of the water, the texture of the towel or the brush or whatever, and the way it would feel to get the dirt or the grime off the dish, and how that warm water would wash away in great detail. He would say, most of us, when we wash the dishes, we're only doing it for one reason: to move on to the next thing we got to do, because we want to go watch that television program. We've got to go feed. We're washing the dishes because we're just not because we really want to wash the dishes. We're washing the dishes as a matter of just getting it done and get on to the next thing we got to do. So his practice, one of his practices that he talks about, is this idea of wash the dishes to wash the dishes. Notice everything you're doing all the time. And it doesn't have to be just washing the dishes. It could be driving the car. Like, how many times do we get in the car to drive somewhere and we get to our destination and most of us are like, I don't remember driving. I don't remember what cars I saw. I don't remember what buildings I passed. I couldn't tell you if the leaves and the trees were, there or not. I couldn't tell you, what houses I saw, if there were kids in the front yards of the houses I drove. We have no recollection, because most of us, when we're driving the car, we're not driving the car. We're just trying to get from point A to point B. It could be talking to a loved one on the phone. It could be taking a shower or a bath, noticing, again, everything that you're doing, paying attention to everything. That is a Zen practice. That is, you may not be thinking of yourself of practicing Zen or practicing meditation, but if you take the time to notice these activities in your life and you're really just doing them to do them and to experience them, you are engaging in a meditative practice, even if you're not formally sitting on a cushion somewhere. The formal sitting practice, where you kind of see people Zen, right, at mudra, they're doing this right here, and they're very erect. That's all part of the discipline. Yes, it certainly is helpful, and if you become a student of Zen Buddhism, but it's not That's really not just meditation is so much more than that. Meditation is everyday life. Paying attention is everyday life. So that is what I've tried to do. And I will say this, and I'll wrap it up here in a second, because people want to ask questions or just want to chat. Doing this now for going on 6-7 years, seriously. And I'm training to be a Dharma teacher in the Quantum School of Zen. It has hugely impacted my life in a positive way. Hugely impacted my life. My son, who's 19, almost 20, will sometimes say to me, "Dad, you've changed a lot." My mom, who's 84, will say, "Michael, you've changed a lot over these last few years." And I think what they mean by that is, I hope what they mean by that is that you pay attention a lot more to things. That when you talk, you really talk and you listen, or when you're with me, you're really with me, you're not someplace else. And it's also made me much more even keel about emotions. And again, it's not about denying emotions. It's not about ignoring feelings. If you're angry, feel angry. If you're sad, feel sad. But then we don't attach to those things. We let them go. And what does the next moment bring? Relief. Yes, relief. Then the next moment, joy. Joy. Yes, okay, joy. And the next moment, boredom. Yes, boredom. Sometimes I have this practice called this too, where I'll bow to whatever the moment is, and I say, "Yep, this too." And I may not physically bow; it may be more of an internal bow, like this too. Yep, I'm bored to death right now. This too. I'm really angry right now. This too. Everything, paying attention to each of those moments, not filtering them out or trying to push them away. This too is part of human experience. This too. So that's probably another way of saying paying attention. This too. I recognize that. So with that, Sophia or Jay, I think I'll kind of step back and let somebody else jump in.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing the stories and the feelings and the tones and the practice. I think that because attention, for some people, they're very familiar with it. Oh, somebody asked, what is attention? Mike, I've often understood it as a combination of beer and coffee. And here's what I mean. If you drink beer, it'll make you relaxed, but not very attentive. And if you drink coffee, it'll make you very alert, but sometimes a little anxious if you have too much. So it's kind of the combination of beer and coffee without the side effects and without the need for an external substance, but relaxed, alert, awareness. But what's often struck me is that and sometimes it calls for non-judgment. It's simply aware of what is, without saying yes, no, up, down, right, wrong, true, false. Simply aware of what is. And we heard so much of that in your stories. Let's open it up now to anybody and everybody. And you can ask Mike a question, but you can also simply share a thought, a question about the role attention plays in your life, or you would like for it to play in your life.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, I'm wondering, because I'm very familiar with 12 steps, and I currently have a younger brother, who's very, very ill and has a pretty bad case of cirrhosis. He's getting treated for it. I'm wondering how a Zen approach to 12-step work is maybe a little different, if it is, than just, being in a, whatever you would call it, regular Al-Anon meeting.
Yeah, I'm happy to say just a little bit about it. I'm certainly not an expert in 12-step. What brought me to a 12-step program was Al-Anon because of my, as I mentioned to you, my ex-wife addiction. And if you guys don't know, Al-Anon is sort of a sister program or brother program to Alcoholics Anonymous for those who love or have family members who are addicted. And our sense of powerlessness is not over alcohol as it is for the alcoholic or the drug addict, but it is for our sense of control, that we need control. We want to control the alcoholic or the drug addict. We want them to do what we want them to do. When you're in Al-Anon, it's all about, focusing on what that person is doing wrong. Well, in Al-Anon, we say, okay, what about us? What do we need to be doing different? So that's sort of I want to make sure you understand my orientation towards 12-step comes from that. But having said that, we have a 12-step Buddhist group that meets Sundays at 12 on Zoom and at EBS. And I think the way I would answer that is, in 12-step lingo, we would talk about powerlessness. We are powerless. The alcoholic has no power over alcohol. That the Al-Anon person has no power over any other human being, over the alcoholic. And in traditional 12-step, of course, which is more Christian oriented, but to be quite honest, what I've read from Bill W., and who was one of the founders of 12-step, he actually had quite a Zen perspective. And in the early days of AA, he actually wanted to incorporate a slightly more Buddhist kind of perspective, but it didn't end up going that way. And so it is more the word God or a higher power is so often more mentioned. So in our Buddhist and 12-step groups, we don't get hung up on the whole God, higher power thing so much. It's really about what we can do. It's not that we have to ask a higher power to take away our burdens. We're already capable of taking away of our burdens, by paying attention, by understanding that we don't have control over so many aspects of our life. So again, every 12-step group, 12-step Buddhist group has a different flavor. So I don't want to speak for all of them in any way. Some still have a higher power kind of lingo or focus to them. And even like in our group at EBS, we have plenty of people who they prefer their Christian orientation to the 12-step, but they still also like, in much like the two veins of Christianity and Buddhism that Jay talked about, they still also like the Buddhist perspective. And so we have wonderful discussions sometimes about those two veins within a 12-step context. I don't know if that answers your question, Tina, but
it does. And I was also going to say, when you were talking about, to pay attention, like even if you're driving in your car or whatever. I've not been out much because of the pandemic, but the few times that I am, I've tried to be more attentive, and I do try and take daily walks, and it really does help to pay attention to just the smallest of things in nature, or the breeze, or the warm sunshine on your face. And I was thinking, so many times, especially pre-pandemic, I was probably on what I would call autopilot. Like if I was going from one place to another, I didn't particularly pay attention to the scenery or people I may have passed or buildings or whatever. My car just got me wherever I was going, but that idea of really taking in the world around you can be a very, very pleasant, calming thing, particularly now when we're all under more stress because of the pandemic and because of our isolation in a lot of cases. So I really appreciated your talking about that. Thank you.
Mike, let's get a couple more people to respond, and then you can respond to them, and then Sophia will bring us to a conclusion. Does anybody else want to offer a comment like Tina did, just about the role attention plays in your life, or you'd like for it to play in your life?
I can share an experience quick. There's a Facebook group that I'm a part of called Divorced Queer Mamas. And there's an asterisk as well, because it could include your dads and queer, however you describe yourself. And one of the things that we've talked about a lot is big gray rock. And this is kind of an experience that when an abusive ex talks to you, you become like a big gray rock. And so you notice that they're sending you an email or a text or whatever their demands are, whatever their abuse might be coming towards you. And then like a big gray rock, you just sit with it. And you try not to respond in anger and frustration and everything else that you might be feeling, which is a really, really hard practice, actually, to become unhooked from those conversations. So anyway, that's a practice that is very much like being aware, being present in the moment, but not hooked in. And then what can you say, what is helpful, what is not, but being that big gray rock for a little bit without speaking is really helpful.
What a beautiful metaphor. Anybody else just like to make a comment in response to Mike? Anybody? Meg and then Al.
Okay.
Just briefly, I really liked this too. I thought you could bring so many nuances to that might, for your purposes, you might want to keep it neutral. But I'm thinking that, to be honest with yourself, you might want to really weight it one way or another. This too. And I just really liked it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
Al?
Well, one thing I'm very mindful of in myself and in others is just how attentive people are in conversations. It's very important to me that people not be fiddling with their phones or whatever, but you have this sense of people focusing and being attentive just to that moment of togetherness. But a question I have, when I was in parish ministry, we had a once a month evening prayer service in which there was 10 to 12 minutes of just silence together. And I wondered, Mike, if you have noticed the difference between being in this moment of meditation alone and being with others in that experience, and what the difference is for you.
Yeah, sure. I'll briefly answer that. Thanks, Al, for that question. I think there's a profound difference. And I think from a Buddhist standpoint, that's one reason we do retreats. And we talk about the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Sangha is the community that comes together, right? The Dharma is the teachings, so to speak, and the Buddha is Buddha. So the Sangha is super important. And when you go to retreat and you sit, now again, in the pandemic, we're not able to do this in person, but when we sit in silence with others, there is something for me that's really powerful when we do that together. And there's some sense of being able to do that on Zoom, as crazy as it sounds. I mean, it's taken me a while to realize it and to see it, but I do get it. It's certainly not the same thing as in person, but there's absolutely, I think, something about sitting with a community of people who are all doing it, sharing that, and that it almost magnifies it in some sort of a way, to feel the power of the Sangha. I mean, the Buddha said at the end of his life that of the three, the Sangha was the most important. And so that points to what you're saying. I think, the idea of a practice that you do with others is very important.
Sylvia, you had a comment. Would you like to make it? Everybody might be interested. Would you like to make it aloud to everyone?
Yes, I just, I commented earlier that this is definitely what I needed to listen to today. This sense of attention, of awareness, of being with your thoughts or with your environment or your place. But I love the thoughts of chanting together in unison, just the sense of being together, because I think the pandemic has caused us to just have a sense of void and direction and purpose. I know for me personally, in my particular place in life right now, it's just accentuated an aloneness and isolation. And so I love the idea of, again, parish ministry and being together and praying together, or what you were talking about, Mike, of chanting together in unison. Just creates a warm sense of togetherness, and bowing, a practice of bowing together again brings in the body, brings in the living word. Jay, you talked about that earlier. I think it's a vital need that we have to connect in our I don't know-ness.
Mm-hmm.
I need that.
Mm-hmm. Mike, do you think that when you sit in silence with others, like let's say you're really distracted, as it's not going so well by some measure, do you think you can be nourished by the silence of another? In other words, is there a kind of osmosis by which someone else's silence can somehow enrich your own?
Yes,
When you see with people, that's the case. I'm wondering if sitting in silence can be a collective osmosis.
I completely think it can. I know I've experienced something like what you described. I think when I've done retreats, or even when we were still able to meet in person at EBS, and we would have our practices together with 10, 11 of us together, sitting or chanting or bowing together. But the sitting part in particular, yeah, I think that there is absolutely a sense that, if you're struggling while you're in your sitting practice, that feeling the energy of the others around you who are all engaged in the same effort of attention, bringing attention to the moment, and knowing that those around you are there supporting you and you're supporting them, that energizes and reaffirms everyone's practice then. So, whether you want to call it osmosis or anything else, I think that's very important. And I know that some of the people I practice with now, since we've moved to Zoom, have struggled with that. We've talked about that. Like, Zoom doesn't give that to me. When I'm Zoom, I used to feel the energy of others around me, but now on Zoom, I don't. And so, that's a whole other question. It just is what it is. This is the idea of acceptance, and this is the way we now have to do this, to do it safely. And for me, I've been able to substitute some of that, even though I get the energy from you through Zoom, even though I'm not in person with you. We would have normally maybe done this in person, not on Zoom. But I think you can still feel it. I can feel your faces and your energies here with me today. And I think that, if we allow ourselves, we can still experience that until we can all be together again.
And I want to turn it to Sophia. I want to mention Nita's question to you. I don't think we have time to answer it, but it's a good question. Does the Zen way, the Zen path that you're on, include within it an appreciation of synchronicity, where surprising things happen that you didn't expect, that are connected to other things in spiritually engaging ways? I'll just let you nod your head on that one, yes or no.
Yeah, I think of the word karma when I read that.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Sophia, could you bring us to a close?
Yes, Mike, thank you so much for sharing about attention and how it took you to a deeper understanding of yourself as well
Yeah.
as Zen. We really
And Sophia, can I just say one quick thing and I'll let you finish. I'm going to drop my email here in the chat box. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, email, has more questions, would like some information about anything I talked about, there you go. Just dropped it in there.
Thank you so much. We'll send out your email too. As always, we'll close with a poem. But before that, thanks to Mike for sharing his story. Thank you, Jay, for moderating the session. Our gratitude to Carb Institute for co-sponsoring. And thank you, all of you, for being present and attentive in this class today. I think it was a very good start for our winter session. For those who are new, we will send you all an email every Tuesday morning, which will tell you about the letter of the day and the speaker of the day. And we meet every Wednesday at noon. With that, I would like to close with one of my favorite poems, but I'm saying it because, Mike, you talked about suffering, and it really deeply connected with me because you said that when you were suffering, all you wanted to do was escape from it. But what you really needed, or what your soul really needed, was to tune in to what is going on inside you and accept and embrace all the thoughts and the emotions. And it stayed with me, deeply connected with me. So I'm going to share a poem by Rumi, who you all know is a 30th century Sufi poet. And the poem is Guest House, which talks about connecting and embracing all the emotions that you feel within yourself. And it's a very good reminder to being attentive to what is going on inside us. So we close with this today. It's called The Guest House. This human being is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the pain, the malice, the anger, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Thank you all. Salam, peace, and shalom. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. Thank you, Jay and Sophia.
Thank all of you so much. Enjoy.